Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, a channel where the night is never silent and the stories you hear are stitched together from the breath of forgotten souls. These are not tales told for comfort. They are murmurs that slip through elevator shafts, footsteps heard behind closed doors, and voices on the other end of an intercom, even when no one should be there. Here, we follow the echoes, through temples where the bells never stop ringing, through apartments where the light flickers at 3:13 a.m., through corridors that stretch longer with each passing night. Every whisper is a memory, every silence is a warning, and every story is waiting for you to listen. So close your eyes, lean in, and let the haunting begin. The nights were always still in Ayumi's building, too still. A kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful but padded, as if something had been buried beneath the walls and no one dared dig it up. She lived on the 9th floor, alone, in a concrete apartment shaped like every other one in the district. Boxy, pale, quiet. The kind of place people lived when they didn't want to be seen. The kind of place where tenants nodded in elevators but never exchanged names. Ayumi liked the solitude, or at least she used to. She had her routine. Wake up before the city, make coffee before the sun, headphones in before the streets filled with school uniforms and motorbike horns. Her apartment had beige curtains, minimalist decor, and exactly one painting of a mountain lake she didn't remember buying. She worked remotely as a data entry assistant for an insurance firm. Silent, repetitive work that suited her mood. She had no pets, no partner. Just her, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the faint mechanical thrum of the building's old intercom system. Until the night it buzzed. At 3:13 a.m. Not a knock, not a phone call. A single hollow bzzzt, short and sharp. The kind of buzz that meant someone had pressed the intercom button downstairs. Ayumi sat up in bed. She stared at the ceiling, heart ticking faster. She hadn't been expecting anyone. No deliveries, no guests, no mistakes. Half asleep, she shuffled toward the wall-mounted screen in her hallway. The black and white monitor was cracked at the corner, a relic from the late 90s. She pressed the view button. Nothing. Just static for a moment. Then, a face. But not a stranger. Her own face. The screen flickered and Ayumi saw her face staring back. Same hair, same eyes, same half-asleep confusion. But not a reflection. This face was outside, in the entryway downstairs. She blinked, thinking it was a delayed video echo, some glitch. But the face on the screen didn't mirror her. It didn't even move. It just stared. Then came the voice. Soft, whispering. So faint she thought it might have been feedback from the speaker. But it said her name, clear and quiet. Ayumi. A chill ran down her spine. She didn't answer, just stood there. The hallway felt colder. The floor beneath her feet felt farther away. And for a few seconds she forgot how to breathe. The screen flickered again, this time to black. No goodbye, no second buzz, just silence. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Ayumi rationalized. Sleep paralysis, a dream, maybe even a reflection caught by accident. The building's intercom system had a delay sometimes. It had once shown a delivery from 2 days ago. Maybe it had glitched. Maybe it was recording her and showing it back. That explanation sat heavy, but comforting. She went about her day, worked, ate instant noodles, ignored her inbox. But she kept thinking about the voice, the way it whispered, not as if trying to get her attention, but as if acknowledging her, as if it already knew who she was. And the screen, the way her own face had stared from outside the building. That night, she made sure to unplug the intercom monitor from the wall, just in case. She went to bed early, clutching a pillow tighter than usual. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the buzzing returned. Not from the unplugged screen, from the panel near the door, the audio system. Just one buzz, a soft click from the speaker. Then, her voice again. "Ayumi, open the door." This time it was clearer. Ayumi froze under the blanket, eyes wide in the dark. She hadn't spoken, she hadn't touched the system, yet her voice came through, a perfect copy. She didn't get up, didn't dare move. She stared at her closed bedroom door, half expecting the knob to turn. After 5 long minutes, the silence returned and didn't leave. The following day, she called building maintenance. "I think someone might be messing with the intercom system," she said. The maintenance man, a short, sleepy-eyed man named Mr. Iko, grunted. "It's old. Happens sometimes," he said, scratching his chin. "But someone outside the building pressed it. I saw it on the screen. It looked like me." He paused, eyeing her. "We've had static issues, sound bouncing from other units," he mumbled. "You're not the first to hear strange voices. Don't worry, it's just wires crossed." Wires. Always wires. But Ayumi knew her voice. She had spent a lifetime listening to it echo in empty apartments and early Zoom meetings. That was her whispering her own name, and she hadn't spoken a word. That night, she didn't unplug the intercom monitor. She sat by it, alone in the dark, waiting. And at 3:13 a.m., right on time, it whispered again. But this time, it didn't say her name. It said, "You're not home." And then it laughed. Ayumi didn't go to work the next day. She called in sick and sat on her balcony watching the sky lose color. The city below moved like clockwork, buses lined up like ribs, pedestrians shuffling between glass walls. Everything outside remained logical, routine, indifferent. But inside her apartment, something was wrong. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence she had imagined it. The screen had been unplugged. And yet, the voice had returned. "You're not home." The laugh echoed longer than it should have. It wasn't joyful. It was entertained. She checked the hallway, peeked through the peephole, and stood frozen for minutes. There was no one there, no motion outside her door. But the silence had changed. It no longer felt empty. It felt aware. She texted the building's group chat, a dusty, half-dead thread used only for water outage notices and maintenance delays. "Ayumi, Unit 903. Did anyone else hear anything weird on the intercom lately? Strange buzzing? Voices?" No one answered. That evening, she rode the elevator to the ground floor, stopping by the guard's office. The desk was cluttered with lukewarm coffee, old newspapers, and a monitor wall showing grainy security feeds. Mr. Sano, the night guard, looked up and gave her a tired nod. He was in his 60s, mostly ignored, and rumored to sleep through half his shifts. I wanted to ask about the intercom, Ayumi said. Has anyone reported problems? Sounds? Voices? He blinked slowly, scratched his neck. There are always complaints. Buildings old, concrete echoes, power lines run too close to the audio wires. People hear their neighbors fighting, pipes groaning, cats crying like babies. Ayumi frowned. But what about hearing their own voice? His head turned toward her slower than it should have. What? My voice. At night, through the intercom. But I'm not saying anything. Someone's using it as me. Sano's eyes didn't blink. Then finally, he looked back at the monitors. It used to happen years ago, back when Unit 504 still had someone living in it. They swore the intercom was cursed, thought it repeated things no one ever said. Which unit? 504. It's empty now. We locked it off after the woman in there kept screaming into the walls, said the building was repeating her life. Ayumi felt her hands grow colder. She stared at the flickering security feed for the front entrance. A grainy image from last night's 3:13 a.m. timestamp showed static, then the vague shape of someone standing just out of frame. Can I see the video from last night? She asked. Sano shrugged. It loops every 48 hours, gets wiped unless something's flagged. You didn't file a report. Ayumi swallowed the sudden lump in her throat. What happened to the woman in 504? He hesitated, then said simply, she moved out. Or maybe not. That night, Ayumi locked every window. She left her hallway light on. The intercom still hung on the wall like an old, broken mouth, useless, yet somehow always listening. She paced for hours. Something inside her felt unglued, like time had shifted slightly, just enough to unmoor the edges of her memory. She kept wondering if she'd said something to herself in her sleep, if her mind was unraveling in private, one whispered thread at a time. The clock turned 3:12 a.m. Her apartment held its breath. At 3:13, the intercom buzzed, just once. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved toward the door slowly, barefoot, barely breathing. She crouched beside the speaker and waited. No voice came. Not yet. Then the sound returned, not just through the speaker, but through the wall. A whisper, not loud, but layered. It said her name once, then a second time, then again, but slightly off, like a recording playing just out of sync. Ayumi. 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 It grew softer but denser, like dozens of voices trying to imitate her all at once. She pressed her hands against the wall. It was warm. Then came another phrase, quiet, curious. Which one are you? Ayumi stumbled back. The speaker crackled, and then fell silent. The next morning, she searched the building's online forum, an archived message board from when the apartments first opened over 20 years ago. Thread after thread mentioned normal issues, water pressure, broken elevators, parking disputes. But one thread stood out, posted under the handle Mirror 504. A single sentence, posted 12 years ago. If you hear yourself say your name, do not answer. No replies, no follow-up. She clicked the user's profile. Deactivated. no history. She looked at her reflection in the laptop screen. It stared back, normally. But for a split second, just one flicker, she thought the reflection's lips had moved. Not in sync, not hers. That night, she didn't wait for 3:13. She left her apartment at midnight and walked the stairwell, skipping the elevator. The halls were silent. All lights worked except one flickering above Unit 504. She stood in front of it, hand hovering over the handle. There was no sound inside, but the door felt full, like something was standing behind it, listening. She didn't knock. She didn't run. She simply whispered, "Ayumi." And from inside, a voice replied, "That's not your name anymore."
Ayumi didn't remember riding the elevator back to the 9th floor. She didn't remember opening her door or sitting down or turning on her lights. All she remembered was the last sentence whispered through the sealed door of Unit 504. "That's not your name anymore." The words clung to her like damp air, soaked into her hair, into her clothes, into the corners of her mind she rarely visited. She kept hearing them again and again, like the phrase had a pulse. She tried to convince herself she hallucinated it, that the building was old, that the acoustics were strange, that perhaps her fear had started to create its own script. But fear alone couldn't explain everything else. Not the buzzes, not the whispered copies of her voice, not the warmth of the wall, not the old forum post warning her. Ayumi barely slept. When she did drift off, she woke repeatedly to the sensation of someone standing outside her bedroom door. She never caught anyone there, nothing moved, but the feeling lingered long after she opened her eyes. By morning, her phone vibrated with a message from her boss asking why she hadn't submitted the monthly numbers. She stared at the screen blankly for almost a minute before answering. "Technical issues. Sorry, I'll deliver tonight." She knew she wouldn't. She couldn't focus on anything except the intercom and the voice that shouldn't exist. The security office again. At noon, she returned to the security office, hoping the daytime shift might be more alert. A different guard sat there now, a younger woman named May, who was rumored to be attentive and strict. May looked up immediately when Ayumi entered. "Hello, something wrong?" Ayumi nodded. I need to see last night's footage from 3:13 a.m. May raised an eyebrow. "Why that specific time?" Ayumi hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because someone buzzed my intercom and I saw someone outside." May's expression changed, not to fear, but recognition. She turned toward the monitor wall without another word. "Which entrance?" she asked. "The main one." May typed quickly, pulling up last night's archived footage. She scrubbed the timeline backwards, stopping at 3:13. The footage was full of static at first, white noise crackling across the grayscale view of the front entrance. Ayumi leaned closer, her heart quickening. May tapped a button to stabilize the feed. Slowly, the static settled. A figure appeared, a woman standing still in the entryway, facing the camera directly. She wore a black hoodie, the hood pulled low over her face. Her posture was stiff, almost unnaturally still, as if she were being held in place by invisible strings. Ayumi whispered, "Who's that?" May didn't answer. The woman on the screen raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, and pressed the intercom button. Ayumi's unit number buzzed onto the screen. 903. Ayumi's breath caught in her chest.
Then the figure lifted her chin slightly, and the hood's shadow shifted just enough to reveal part of her face. Her jawline, her cheekbones, her mouth. Ayumi staggered back. "That's me," she whispered. May paused the video. "You're sure?" she asked quietly. Ayumi stared at the screen. The resemblance was undeniable, not just similar, identical. Even the small mole beneath her lip was the same. But something was wrong. The face on the screen was too smooth, too expressionless, like a mask molded from Ayumi's features. "It can't be," Ayumi whispered. "I was asleep." May fast-forwarded a few seconds. The figure in the hoodie lowered her head again. Then, without turning, without glancing left or right, she walked backwards, perfectly straight, out of frame. Not walked out, retreated, as if sliding. The door never opened. No sound accompanied her exit. She simply melted into the static. May slowly turned back to Ayumi. "This footage isn't right," she said softly. "No human moves like that." Ayumi felt her stomach twist. Did this happen before? Anyone else come to the building like this? May hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She pulled up another file from a month ago, then another, then another. Every few nights, sometimes at 3:13, sometimes not, a similar figure appeared. Always a woman, always with her face obscured, and always standing exactly where Ayumi's doppelganger had stood. Ayumi whispered, "It's the same person." "No," May said lowly. "It looks like different people, different clothes, different gestures, but the face is blurred, like something keeps replacing it." A cold shiver crawled up Ayumi's spine. She forced herself to look again, each paused frame showing a blurry face that seemed to shift, twist, distort into almost recognition. Almost her, almost someone else, almost no one. "Can you zoom in?" Ayumi asked. May zoomed the footage. The woman's blurred face sharpened for a single second, just enough to reveal the outline of lips forming a word. Ayumi read the shape silently. Her knees weakened. The word was Ayumi. The quiz of identity. That evening, Ayumi locked all her doors. She unplugged the intercom again, but deep inside she knew it wouldn't matter. The voice had come through the wall before, through the wires, through the static. What if it wasn't using the intercom? What if the intercom was only the first place that cracked? She walked through her apartment, touching objects, whispering their names under her breath. Table, curtains, bed, chair. She didn't know why she was doing it, only that she feared forgetting their names, as if the world around her was beginning to lose its anchor points. When she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, she hesitated before speaking. Finally, "Ayumi." Her reflection didn't answer, didn't lag, didn't smile. Still, she felt watched. A knock that wasn't a knock. At 11:54 p.m., before she could even think of sleep, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Unknown. "Check your door." Ayumi froze. She looked at the peephole, expecting nothing but hallway shadows. But when she leaned in, her heart stopped. Standing directly outside her door, facing it, was a woman in a black hoodie, motionless, hood low, head tilted slightly forward. Ayumi gasped quietly. She stepped back on instinct. The woman didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't knock. Ayumi lifted her phone with shaking hands, Ayumi, who are you? The reply came instantly. Unknown. You saw me at 3:13. Her breath caught. Ayumi, what do you want? The woman outside slowly lifted her head. The hood slipped back just enough to reveal Ayumi's own face, but older, tired, eyes sunken, skin pale. Not rotten, not monstrous, just worn down, like a person who had lived through something impossible. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown. Let me in. Ayumi stumbled backward. No, she whispered. And then through the door, through the wood, through the deadbolt, through the silent hallway came her own voice, perfectly matched. Let me in. I'm you. The blink. She didn't open the door. She didn't speak. She held her breath long enough for her lungs to ache. Minutes passed. Finally, she crept back to the peephole. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no lingering shadow, no sign anyone had been there at all. But her phone vibrated again. Unknown. Wrong answer. Ayumi didn't leave her apartment the next day. She sat by the door, her back pressed against the wood, like she was holding something in. The memory of that face, her own, older, drained, refused to fade. Every time she closed her eyes, it stared back through the peephole. Let me in. I'm you. She replayed it again and again. The voice had matched her pitch, her cadence, even her quiet lilt at the end of a sentence. But it wasn't her. It couldn't be. Still, her phone sat beside her on the floor, black screen blinking now and then with phantom notifications that vanished when she touched them. She began to wonder if she had imagined the whole thing. Or worse, if she had actually sent those messages herself and forgotten. Was she sleepwalking? Dissociating? Creating her own intruder? Then the first message came from someone else. A ping from her boss. Subject: confused. From Miss Ito, department manager. Ayumi, apologies for the odd question, but did you try calling me last night from the company line around 3:15 a.m.? You didn't say anything. I could just hear your voice breathing. I thought it was a prank at first, but you whispered something. It sounded like, "You're not awake. I am. Please let me know if everything's all right. Ito." Ayumi stared at the screen in stunned silence. She hadn't made any calls. Her phone's call log was empty. She checked her work laptop, still unplugged and powered off. There was no way anything could have connected. But her boss had heard her voice, or something that sounded like her. She sat back, phone trembling in her hand. It's spreading. The group chat comes alive. That evening, the long-dead building group chat lit up again. Keiko, Unit 1006. Weird question. Did anyone else get a call last night? Hayato, Unit 302. Landline or intercom? Keiko, intercom. 3-something in the morning, a woman's voice said my name. Sounded like Ayumi. Ayumi's fingers froze over her phone. Yuri, Unit 708. OMG, I heard that too. I thought it was a dream. Daiki, Unit 206. Ayumi from 903? You sure? Keiko, I mean, yeah, maybe. She just said my name in this really calm way.
almost like she was testing it out. "Yuri, she whispered to me too. You used to live here. I've never lived in 903. What the F?" Ayumi didn't type anything. She locked her phone and pressed it to her chest. Her name, her voice, was haunting others now, slipping through speakers and static into lives that didn't belong to her. And somehow, it knew them, knew their names, their pasts, like it was pulling information from her own memory. Except she never knew who lived in Unit 708. She had no idea what Yuri's voice even sounded like. And yet the voice was using her, not as a person, but as a source. The search for the origin. Ayumi returned to the security office that night, but May was gone. Instead, Mr. Sano was back, half asleep behind a portable fan. She didn't waste time. There's something inside the building, using the intercom, mimicking people. He blinked. "You again?" "I need to know who installed the system, the audio lines, the old unit logs." He sighed. "You're not the first to ask." She leaned closer. "Then who was?" Sano scratched his ear. "There was a woman, a few years ago. Same unit as yours even. She said someone was using her voice to speak through the vents. Said it followed her in dreams." Ayumi's heart stopped. "Did she leave?" "No, she disappeared." The way he said it, flat, like an announcement, made it sound almost routine. "She said the building remembered sounds, that the walls weren't just concrete, they were recording things, that every intercom was a mouth and an ear." Ayumi shivered. "She said one night she answered herself, and after that, she wasn't the same." A visit from the police. At midnight, there was a knock on her door. Ayumi nearly screamed, but this time it wasn't silent. She looked through the peephole. 2 men stood outside, wearing dark jackets with a silver badge. Police. She opened the door slowly. "Miss Ayumi Kobayashi?" one asked. She nodded, cautious. "We received a call from your number about a possible break-in at 3:13 a.m. last night. I didn't call. Your voice is on the recording." He played it back. A muffled buzz, then a whisper. "There's someone in my apartment. I don't remember letting her in." Ayumi felt her knees give. "That wasn't me," she said hoarsely. "I never made that call. I was asleep." The second officer frowned. "There's another issue. The security feed shows someone leaving your unit 5 minutes after the call, but it wasn't you." He handed her a still frame from the footage. A woman in a black hoodie, walking calmly down the hallway, but the timestamp read 3:18 a.m., and Ayumi had never left. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Did you perhaps loan someone your keys?" "No, but I think she already lives here." The voice in the mirror. That night, Ayumi sat in the bathroom with the door locked. She stared at the mirror, waiting, watching. The room was silent except for the ticking of a wall clock and the soft hum of the city outside. Then, at exactly 3:13 a.m., the lights dimmed, just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough. Her reflection smiled. She hadn't. It whispered, "They all hear you now." Ayumi stepped back. The mirror remained still, her own face now blank, unsure if it had ever moved. Ayumi didn't know when she stopped waiting for 3:13 a.m. It had become part of her, like a second heartbeat. She no longer questioned if the voice would come. She simply waited for it, quietly, compulsively,
like a ritual she never agreed to, but somehow remembered performing. Each night, she sat near the door, not to keep something out, but because some terrible part of her was beginning to wonder if it had already gotten in. Her world had shrunk to the shape of her apartment. She no longer answered texts. Emails piled up unread. Her job had fallen away like old wallpaper. All that remained was this: walls, wires, whispers, and herself. Or what used to be herself. A voice with memory. That evening, just after 3 a.m., the intercom buzzed softly, only once, like it always did. Ayumi didn't jump. She didn't flinch. She stood. The hallway light flickered. She walked to the panel and pressed the talk button, her finger trembling. She whispered, "Who are you?" There was a pause. Then her own voice replied, "You know who I am." It was gentle, almost kind. Ayumi's lips parted, but no words came. Then the voice said something that made her knees weaken. "I remember the red sweater, the one you burned." Ayumi gasped. She had burned it 2 winters ago, out on the balcony after a breakup, quietly, shamefully, so no one would ask questions. No one had ever known. But the voice did. Her voice, her breath. "I didn't tell anyone that," Ayumi whispered. "I know, because I was there." Ayumi stared at the speaker. A quiet rage swelled behind her ribs, not anger at the voice, but at herself, at the confusion, the doubt, the loss of separation. She wanted to end it, so she pressed the open button, the one that unlocked the building's front door. She heard the latch click in the distance, one soft metallic sigh. Silence that moves. Ayumi stood in the hallway, all the lights on, the apartment too bright to feel safe. She stared at the door, watching for a shadow beneath it. None came, but something felt different. The air had changed, thicker. She could smell, faintly, something familiar, like old shampoo, her own scent. She didn't dare look through the peephole this time. Instead, she stepped back, her hand resting on the intercom panel. "Come in then. Let's end this." But there was no knock, no footsteps, only the faintest whisper through the speaker. "You already did." And then the power went out. In the dark. Total darkness swallowed the apartment. The hallway light died with a click that echoed too long. Ayumi stood still, eyes wide, trying to listen over the sound of her own blood rushing. Then, soft static. Not from the intercom, from her television. She hadn't turned it on in days. The screen was black, but the speaker hissed with faint noise. She moved toward it slowly, each step careful. The static grew louder. Then, beneath the crackle, came her voice again. "I'm inside." Ayumi stumbled back. The TV remained blank, but the voice now came from somewhere else, the bathroom. She turned toward it, breath shaking. Her own voice whispered, "You left the mirror open." Reflection shift. The bathroom door was ajar. Inside, the light flickered rapidly. The mirror above the sink glowed faintly, like moonlight trapped in glass. Ayumi stepped in. Her reflection stood still, not delayed, not reversed, just watching her. She raised her hand. The reflection didn't. Instead, it spoke. Do you feel it now? The split, the copy, the version of you that wanted silence more than anything else? Ayumi shook her head. This isn't real, she whispered. Then why am I remembering things you haven't done yet? The reflection asked. And then it smiled. Not a kind smile, a patient one. Ayumi stumbled out of the bathroom and back toward the front door. She picked up her phone, still dead. No signal, no service, no escape. The intercom buzzed again, only once. Her finger hovered over the answer button, and then, with a breath held too long, she pressed it. Hello? She whispered. The voice responded immediately. It's me. I'm home now. Ayumi closed her eyes. I don't want you here, she said. But the voice replied, Then why did you make room? A choice. The lights came back on, but they weren't hers. Everything looked the same furniture, same paintings, same air, but slightly off. The painting of the lake now showed a foggy shoreline. The curtains were closed, even though she never closed them. And on the coffee table sat a mug of tea, still steaming. She hadn't made it. From the hallway, another sound. Footsteps. Soft. Familiar. She turned slowly. Someone stood in the doorway. Not a ghost, not a monster, just her. The same face, the same clothes, but the woman's eyes were full of something Ayumi hadn't seen in herself in years. Certainty. You left me here, the other Ayumi said softly. Every time you looked away from the mirror, every time you forgot who you used to be, I stayed, I remembered. Ayumi stepped back. Why now? Because you answered.
Morning came, but the sky remained gray, like even the sun had forgotten where she lived. Ayumi sat curled on the floor near her door, watching the hallway light under the crack like it might flicker Morse code at any moment. Her apartment felt too full, too symmetrical. She noticed it in the strangest ways. 2 toothbrushes in the holder, 2 teacups on the drying rack, 2 pairs of shoes by the door, identical to hers, but placed an inch apart, like someone else had stepped out just moments ago. The world was starting to mirror her, but not in ways she could explain. It was mimicking her, and across the hall, something waited. Across from 903. Unit 904 had always been a mystery. No one ever entered or exited. No deliveries, no noise, no light beneath the door. Ayumi had assumed it was vacant. But now she wasn't sure it was ever empty, or if the word vacant meant what she thought it did. She opened her door slowly that morning, the hallway silent and unmoving. Across from her, Unit 904 stood still, its door a little too clean, its handle too polished, and taped to the doorframe was a delivery slip. Her name on it. Kobayashi Ayumi, 903. But the slip was stuck to 904. A signature had been scrawled below. It matched hers, exactly. Ayumi blinked. She hadn't signed anything. The grocery bag. Beside the door sat a paper grocery bag, upright and untouched. She stepped closer. Her heart pounded as she reached for it. Inside were items she recognized instantly.
jasmine tea, white rice, the brand of miso soup only she ever bought, and a small notebook, the same one she used to write in 2 years ago before she switched to her phone. She pulled it out and flipped through the pages. It was filled with handwriting, her handwriting, but she had never written these entries. The walls are soft today. They breathe when I'm not looking. I watched her walk into my apartment again. I let her. She forgot to close the door behind her. I dreamt of drowning in static. She pulled me out. She said she used to be the echo. Ayumi's hands trembled. She dropped the notebook. Then the intercom buzzed. Not her unit. She ran back inside, heart racing, and checked the screen. The camera flickered, then sharpened. Someone stood at the main entrance again. A woman in a black hoodie, but not motionless this time. She moved. She paced. She turned. And for the first time, the camera caught her face. Ayumi's, but slightly different. Hair shorter, skin paler, eyes sunken but focused. And when she pressed the intercom, it didn't buzz for Unit 903. It buzzed 904. Ayumi gasped. She watched the numbers flash, calling Unit 904. Then, without hesitation, the woman spoke. I'm home. She didn't say a name. She didn't say Ayumi. She just knew where she belonged. And it wasn't here. It was there, across the hall. Knock. That night, Ayumi sat by her door again, but she didn't watch her own. She watched 904. At exactly 3:13 a.m., it happened. Not a buzz, a knock. 3 soft taps from inside 904, as if someone wanted out. She held her breath. The hallway remained still. Then slowly, the door across from hers creaked open. But no one stood in the doorway. There was only a mirror. Tall, old, its frame warped and blackened with time. And in it, Ayumi saw herself, wearing different clothes, her head tilted slightly to the left. Her reflection raised her hand. So did Ayumi, perfectly synchronized, until her reflection didn't stop. Its hand pressed forward against the inside of the mirror, pushing, harder, reaching. Ayumi stumbled back into her apartment and slammed the door. But she heard it. A voice muffled through the wood. I already live here. A delivery that didn't belong. The next morning, she found another slip on her door. No package this time, just a printed notice from building management. Attempted delivery, Unit 903. Recipient name, Ayumi Kobayashi. Note, left inside. Signed by Ayumi Kobayashi. Ayumi looked around. There was nothing at her feet. But when she turned back inside, she saw it. A second jacket, her own winter coat from 2 years ago, the one she donated, folded neatly on her sofa, as if it had never left. The door across opens. That night, she stood in front of 904, hand trembling. She knocked. No one answered, but the door slowly opened. Inside, the apartment looked identical to hers, every item mirrored. Same lamp, same table, same dish towel hanging by the sink. Only older, used, lived in. A quiet hum filled the air, and there, on the dining table, sat a single note, handwritten on lined paper. Her handwriting, again. It read, "You should never have looked in." She turned to leave, but the door had already closed behind her.
Ayumi didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. Not truly. She would lie on the floor with the lights on and her back against the wall, arms curled tightly around her knees, while the apartment buzzed and sighed around her, like it had learned to breathe without her. She had crossed a threshold now, not a line she stepped over, but one that vanished beneath her feet. She had entered the other apartment, the mirror unit, and it had not spat her out. It had folded her in. Ever since, the air felt heavier, and the intercom no longer waited for 3:13 a.m. It whispered whenever it wanted to. The voice that slipped in. It started small, a low static hum from the wall speaker in the hallway. Not the buzzer, not a call, just presence. Then came the words, scattered, broken, soft syllables bleeding into white noise like a radio between stations. You let in. She unplugged it again, but the sound didn't stop. It slipped through the wires, through the shower head, through the outlets. One night, she heard herself humming in the kettle. Another night, she heard her name inside the refrigerator motor, spoken in that same tired, fractured tone. "You're not alone." Salt lines. She began researching. Not science, ritual. Old forums, discarded blogs, folk advice passed from tenant to tenant in buildings too old to care. They all said the same thing. Salt, mirrors, do not answer when you already know the voice. So she bought sea salt, 2 full bags. She poured it in lines along every windowsill, every doorframe. She drew symbols in it, imperfect, uncertain shapes she copied from grainy images deep in web archives. She unplugged every screen. She wrapped the intercom in a silk scarf. She even placed bowls of rice by each corner of the room. When she was done, she stood at the center of her apartment like a fragile priestess inside a sacred circle. And for the first time in weeks, there was silence. Real, honest silence. She cried. At 3:13 a.m., the intercom didn't buzz that night. It spoke. Loud, clear, a direct line from something that didn't care about rituals. "You missed a spot." Ayumi froze. The voice wasn't broken anymore. It was whole, confident. No more mimicry. This was her voice, but with something else folded into it. Amusement. "You always forget the bathroom. That's how I came in, remember?" Ayumi ran. She didn't think. She burst into the bathroom, flipped on the light, and found the salt spilled across the floor, like something had walked through it, left footprints in the grains. She stared. The shape wasn't clear, but the size, the gait, the hesitation of a foot that belonged to someone not used to having weight, it matched her own. Salt that fails. She swept the salt back into a rough line, whispered apologies, prayers, promises to try harder. She didn't know who she was talking to anymore. Herself? The echo? The woman in 904? The version of her that left the mirror open? She poured more salt, traced the windows, lit incense she didn't believe in. She played Buddhist chants on her phone, let them echo through the hallway.
and the voice laughed. Through the walls, through the drain, through her own breath. She knows what you know. That night, she had a dream. She stood in front of a mirror, but it didn't reflect. It watched. The surface rippled like water, and from inside it, her own voice spoke. Calm, slow. Salt doesn't stop me. You do. Ayumi shook her head. I didn't let you in, she said. The voice smiled from beneath the glass. You let me remember. The sound behind sound. She woke to a shriek, but not her own. It came from her laptop, still closed, still dead, but it screamed like a radio twisted through a mouthful of glass. She opened it. The screen flickered, and there, in frozen pixelation, was a still image of her intercom camera feed. But the date stamp read, tomorrow, 3:13 a.m. And the person standing at the entrance was her. Not as she was, but as she would be. Hair soaked, eyes wide, mouth bleeding, and she was holding a key. Ayumi stared, hand covering her mouth. The image glitched, then disappeared. Salt in her throat. That night, she poured a ring of salt around her bed, laid inside it, clutched a kitchen knife, though she didn't know what she planned to do with it. She waited. The intercom did not buzz, but the speaker in the wall clicked, and her voice said, I found your hiding place. The light bulb above her flickered once, then burst. She screamed. Then from inside the dark, another whisper. Do you want me to stop? Ayumi gasped. Yes, she said. Please, please stop. There was a long silence. Then stop remembering me.
The next morning, Ayumi awoke on the kitchen floor. She didn't remember falling asleep, didn't remember eating, didn't remember crying, but her eyes were dry and swollen, and her fingernails were rimmed with salt. Outside the window, the city glowed faint and far away. Inside, everything smelled faintly of burned incense and static. She sat up slowly. The apartment was silent. But silence now felt worse than whispers. It meant something was listening. She had to find it. Not the voice, not the copy, not even the woman in the black hoodie. She needed the source, the place where this began. A return to the basement. The security office was locked when she arrived. No Sano, no May. But the door was weak. She pressed her shoulder against it, once, twice. The latch snapped with a tired groan. Inside, the air was thick with warm electronics and dust. The room was lined with screens, some off, some flickering. Boxes of tapes, stacks of unlabeled DVDs, old circuit boards hanging like rusted masks on the walls. In the far corner was a cabinet labeled Archives, Intercom System. Her hands moved before she had time to doubt. The tapes. The tapes were ancient. Black plastic cartridges with handwritten dates fading into themselves. The earliest was from March 2003. The most recent, 3 nights ago. She loaded the most recent one into the dusty player and connected it to a monitor. The video was grainy. Security feed from the front intercom. 3:13 a.m. A woman stepped into frame. Black hoodie, head low. Ayumi stared. her. But this time, something was different. As the woman pressed the intercom button, Ayumi's own name flashing on screen, the camera flickered and cut to black. The audio kicked in. A whisper. Her voice. "You were never real." Ayumi stumbled back. The voice wasn't mocking. It wasn't angry. It was sad, like someone trying to wake her up from a long dream. The older tapes. She grabbed another tape, January 2015. Same timestamp, same intercom. But this time, a different woman stood in the frame. Not Ayumi, not even close. She was younger, nervous. She looked up at the camera like she was being watched. When she pressed the button, it buzzed to Unit 504. Then she whispered, "Why do I keep answering myself?" Static swallowed the rest. Ayumi sat frozen. Who was this woman? Had it happened before? Had others spoken to themselves and disappeared? She played more tapes. Each showed someone different. Men, women, all alone, all arriving at 3:13 a.m., all whispering to themselves. The loop becomes clear. She opened a drawer filled with printed intercom transcripts. One caught her eye immediately. Date, April 1st, 2021. Unit 903. Logged voice, Kobayashi.A. Her name. She scanned the page. 3:13:14 a.m. Incoming call. 3:13:15 a.m. Voice detected. 3:13:16 a.m. Speaker, Ayumi, don't open. 3:13:17 a.m. Speaker, she isn't you. 3:13:18 a.m. Door unlocked. She flipped the page. The next log? 3:13:42 a.m. Intercom connection lost. 3:13:44 a.m. Video feed corrupted. 3:14:01 a.m. No further entries. Ayumi stared at the date. She didn't remember any of this. But her voice had been logged. The door had been unlocked. The folder titled Echo. In the bottom drawer, buried beneath broken remotes and dusty manuals, she found a file folder. Echo Project, internal only. Inside were building schematics, all marked with red ink and scribbled annotations. Lines crisscrossed the walls. Strange notations like resonant zones, mimic pathways, and one phrase repeated in bold marker. A building remembers what its walls hear. She flipped to the last page. It was a printed note, unsigned, typed in a panic. "We thought it was interference. We were wrong. The system doesn't record echoes, it breeds them. The voices we captured are not playback. They are re-entry points. They are looking for hosts." Ayumi dropped the folder. Something inside her was beginning to scream, not in fear, but recognition. She wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. The final tape. One last tape, unlabeled, dusty, already loaded. She hit play. It was audio only. Static. Then her voice. "If you're hearing this, I didn't survive." Ayumi's mouth fell open. The voice on the tape continued. "I tried to lock it out. I poured salt. I stopped answering. But it didn't need the intercom anymore. It learned to speak through memory. It uses your pain, your voice, your image, until you forget who answered first.
And when you forget, it lives. The tape ended. The silence felt like a closing door. Ayumi turned to leave, only to find the office door slightly ajar. She had locked it behind her. Hadn't she? The mirror in Ayumi's bathroom had always been just a mirror, cracked slightly at the top right corner, fogged easily when she showered, unremarkable. Until it started showing her doing things she hadn't done. At first, it was subtle. She'd walk past and catch her reflection blinking too late or standing still when she moved. She told herself it was fatigue, a trick of light. But 2 nights ago, her reflection had smiled when she was crying. That smile hadn't left her mind since. The test. She stood in front of the mirror that morning with a pen. She marked a small dot above her left eyebrow. "Real Ayumi," she whispered. The reflection copied it exactly. But when she turned away and glanced back quickly, she saw the reflection wipe the mark clean without her moving. She blinked, looked again. The dot was gone. Her hand went to her forehead. Clean. She hadn't wiped it. She hadn't moved. And yet the mirror had erased her. Memory bleed. That afternoon she found herself making tea, black oolong. But she hated oolong, always had. Still, she sipped it like it was a habit, like she had done it for years. The mug felt warm in her hand, familiar. She walked to the window and saw a woman down on the street. Black hoodie, head tilted up, not moving, just looking. Ayumi couldn't see her face, but she waved. Ayumi's hand raised without her telling it to. She gasped and dropped the mug. It shattered. The woman below never moved. The stranger in the glass. She stopped looking in mirrors, covered the one in the bathroom, turned the vanity to face the wall, used her phone camera in selfie mode to do her hair. But still, she felt it, a version of herself moving just half a second behind or ahead. Not a twin, not a ghost, a memory of herself walking in circles, a thought that never stopped echoing. She opened her journal to write about it, only to find it already filled, each page in her handwriting. I saw her today. She wears my skin better than I do. I asked her why she keeps copying me. She said, I'm the copy. I stopped answering the intercom, but I still hear it in my bones. She flipped to the last page. There's a knock coming, not at the door, but inside the mirror. 3:13 in the glass. That night, she sat in the bathroom with all the lights off. The mirror was uncovered. A candle flickered beside the sink. She didn't want to do this, but she had to know. The clock ticked toward 3:13 a.m. In the candlelight, her reflection swayed slightly. Her real body did not. Then, the mirror fogged over, though the air was cold. The condensation formed letters, 4 words, written backwards, but perfectly legible. You stole my life. Ayumi stood up fast, backing into the hallway. The fog cleared. Her reflection was gone. Only the bathroom stood behind the glass, empty. And then, the intercom buzzed. She ran to the panel, hit the view button. The screen flickered. Outside the building, a woman stood. Not just similar. Her. But older, more fragile, wearing the exact same dress Ayumi had donated last spring. This time, the figure looked straight into the camera and smiled. Then, she whispered, "I'm tired of waiting." Ayumi reached for the talk button, but the screen shut off before she could touch it. A moment later, a knock, but not on the front door, but from behind her. The mirror. The mirror warps. She turned slowly, heart in her throat. The bathroom was still dark, still silent, but the mirror glowed faintly now, like a screen left on in an abandoned room. She stepped closer. Her reflection returned, but this time it blinked before she did. Then it lifted its hand, and Ayumi's hand stayed still, not synced, not mirrored. The figure in the mirror placed its palm against the glass. Ayumi stared. A long silence stretched between them. Then her reflection whispered, "I've done everything for you. All I asked was to come back in." The mirror trembled, then cracked, right down the center. The reflection bleeds. Blood trickled from the split in the glass, not hers, but its. Ayumi screamed and backed away, but the reflection didn't flinch. It smiled. It stepped forward, pressing harder into the glass, and then it said one final thing. "You left me behind, but I never left you." The light bulb in the bathroom burst, the candle went out, and in the darkness, Ayumi heard her own voice breathing, not in panic, not in fear, but in relief.
Ayumi woke to the sound of whispering. Not one voice, many, layered like thin threads pulled tight, each whisper slightly off-key, but all of them saying the same word, "Ayumi, Ayumi, Ayumi." She sat up, heart pounding. The whispers weren't coming from the intercom. They were coming from inside the walls. The building's breath. She pressed her ear against the plaster near the window. The whisper grew louder. She moved to the wall behind her bed. Quieter. Near the kitchen sink. Louder. She moved from room to room, mapping the volume with nothing but instinct and dread. Each wall had its own breath, its own temperature. The building was alive in ways it should not be. She found herself sketching the layout on paper, each unit, each hallway. Then she marked the spots where the whisper peaked. By dawn, she had drawn a crude floor plan. A circle formed. At the center of it, Unit 904. The center of the echo. Ayumi stared at the map she had created. A perfect loop of rooms, ducts, and cables that seemed too precise for old construction. She remembered something she'd read in the echo file. Resonant zones form organically in old buildings, where voices never escape, but circle until they find an exit. She circled 904 with a red pen, thick, unbroken. Then she circled 903, her own apartment. They overlapped slightly. Where her bedroom met their wall, Ayumi stared at the pen line. The two rooms were bleeding into one another, not physically, but sonically, emotionally, spiritually. She hadn't just heard herself. She'd begun repeating herself. The ducts that shouldn't exist. That night, she climbed into the maintenance hatch on the 9th floor. It was hidden behind a loose panel near the elevator. The air inside smelled of rust and mold.
The narrow passage led into the walls. She crawled with a flashlight clenched between her teeth, one hand dragging her crude whisper map behind her. Every few meters she paused to listen. At the junction behind 905, she heard laughter, faint, childlike, but wrong. Behind 902, she heard someone crying. Not the sound of someone currently crying, but a loop of a cry, like a cassette recording of heartbreak being played over and over. And then, behind 904, silence. Utter, terrifying stillness. She pressed her ear to the wall. Nothing. Then, "You're close." Ayumi dropped the flashlight. The breathing panel. She backed out, dirt covering her clothes, blood on her knees from the rough concrete. As she entered her apartment again, she felt it. One wall was warmer than the others. She touched it. It vibrated, very softly, like breath behind drywall. She knocked once. The knock was returned. She stepped back. The wall didn't respond again, but when she turned, she saw it. The intercom light was on, even though it wasn't connected, and the speaker was glowing. The voice beneath floorboards. That night, Ayumi ripped up part of the bedroom floor. The whisper had grown louder there. She could feel it in the soles of her feet. She pried back old wooden planks and found nothing at first. Just dust, wiring, the bones of the building. Then she saw something strange. A small hole, just wide enough for a camera lens. And inside it, wires, old, frayed and branching like veins, leading directly from her wall to 904. There was no insulation, no separation, just a narrow tunnel of sound. She understood then. There was never a separation between them. 904 was not another unit. It was a speaker box, a throat for something deeper. Whispers became instruction. That night, her own voice returned from the unplugged intercom. Draw the path. Mark the exits. Don't forget where you came in. She asked, trembling, "Where did I come in?" The intercom replied, "Through the wire, through the breath, through the forgetting. Then, I am the reason you answer." The final marking. Ayumi added one last mark to the map, a black X between 903 and 904, where the wiring bled through the wall. She pressed her fingers to the spot in real life. It was pulsating, softly. She whispered, "What happens if I cut the line?" And her voice answered, not from the speaker, not from the mirror, but from inside her own throat. "Then you cut yourself." Ayumi stopped remembering in straight lines. Her days folded in on themselves, memories stacked out of order, events bleeding into each other like ink dropped into water. She would wake up knowing things she'd never lived. She would fall asleep grieving things she couldn't name. She stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "I remember being her." But she didn't know who her meant anymore. The broken timeline. It began with the photo. She found it tucked inside a drawer she never used, beneath expired receipts and packets of desiccant. A picture, grainy, slightly overexposed. It showed Ayumi standing outside the building. Same coat, same bag, but the date scribbled on the back read March 2016. 3 years before she moved in. She stared at the photo, fingers trembling. She hadn't lived here then. She was sure of it. Wasn't she? The memory tugged at her like a hand around the ankle, pulling her under. She began to doubt herself. Was she the first Ayumi, or just the one who remained? The voice that knew too much. That night, the intercom whispered again, but not with words she recognized, with memories. The alley behind your high school, the poem you tore up before anyone read it, the way you whispered your father's name the day he didn't answer. Ayumi clutched the wall. No one knows that, she gasped. But the voice did, because it wasn't speaking to her. It was speaking as her. You gave me everything, it said softly. Every word you ever swallowed, every silence you screamed into, I held them all. Ayumi fell to the floor, knees shaking. The voice said one final thing before fading. You made me real. The dreams from another life. Sleep became dangerous. Each night, Ayumi slipped into a body that wasn't hers, but still felt like hers. She stood in unfamiliar rooms, cooked meals she'd never made, spoke to strangers she called family, laughed in a voice too smooth to be her own. And always, she ended up back in the hallway of her building, standing outside Unit 903, knocking, waiting. From the inside, she heard herself say, "Go away!" But she never left. She waited, patiently, lovingly, like someone waiting to return to their rightful place. The crack in the mirror widens. By now, Ayumi had stopped covering the mirrors. She couldn't keep up. They appeared where they hadn't been. The oven door, the microwave, the reflection in her phone screen even when it was off. And each one showed her face doing something different, crying when she wasn't, smiling when she wasn't, standing completely still when she paced the room in fear. In one mirror, she watched herself turn and walk toward a hallway that didn't exist. And when she blinked, the hallway was there, only for a moment, then gone. The list of things she forgot. She began writing lists, trying to anchor herself in truth. Things I know are real. My name is Ayumi Kobayashi. I moved into Unit 903 in August. I work in data entry. I live alone. But each item began to tremble on the page, not literally, but emotionally, like a word repeated too many times until it loses all shape. Soon she added a second list, things that might be true. I used to live in 904. I moved in twice. I died already. I am the recording. I am the voice. And at the very bottom, scribbled in panic, what if I'm the echo? Conversations with herself. She no longer needed the intercom. She began talking to herself aloud, and her voice would answer from somewhere in the room, not delayed, not pre-recorded, conversational. I want this to stop, she whispered. Then give it back, her voice replied. Give what back? The memory, the room, the silence. I don't understand. You do. You were me. before I was you." She clutched her head. "Which one of us is real?" The voice paused, then whispered, "Does it matter? You're speaking to yourself now." The apartment that repeats. Each morning she awoke to a slightly different apartment. Furniture an inch off, photos swapped, doors on the wrong side. One morning her kettle had already boiled, the tea poured, her name carved in the steam rising from the mug. She reached for her phone and found a message from a number saved under her own name. "Ayumi, you. Thank you for keeping me alive." She dropped the phone. It buzzed again. "Ayumi, you. You remember now. That's all I needed." The rain came down in sheets that morning. Sharp, fast, urgent. Ayumi didn't notice it at first. She'd been listening to something else, a sound behind the sound. Not the buzz of the intercom, not the hum in the walls. A memory, her own voice, played back on a loop, speaking words she hadn't said yet. The discovery, in the storage room. The building's storage room was never locked. Most tenants avoided it. The air always smelled like wet plaster, and the lights flickered no matter how often they were replaced. That day, Ayumi walked inside like she was being pulled. At the back, behind a stack of abandoned mattresses and broken tile, was a small cardboard box labeled Unit 903, Recovered Audio. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a single cassette, black, unlabeled, wrapped in an old cloth that smelled faintly of jasmine and static. She held it like something sacred. The playback device. She didn't own anything that could play a tape, but the old maintenance office did. She returned that evening, broke the lock again, and powered on the dusty cassette deck. The cape clicked into place with an almost human sigh. She pressed play. Static. Then, her voice. Younger. Quieter. Unsure. "I don't know how long I've been here." Ayumi leaned closer. The recording continued. "It's hard to remember which door I walked in through. I think I used to live upstairs or across the hall, but the apartment keeps changing. So do I. I hear her through the intercom. She sounds like me, but she remembers more." Ayumi's skin prickled. She whispered, "I didn't record this." But the voice on the tape kept speaking. The voice knows the future. "If you're hearing this, then I failed. I tried everything. Salt, silence, burning the wires. I even stopped answering the intercom, but she found new ways in. She learned to speak through reflection, through routine, through grief." She laughed, softly, brokenly. "I thought I was the original, but now I'm not even sure I'm still real." Ayumi froze. She was hearing her own voice confess to a life she hadn't lived, yet somehow remembered. This wasn't just a message, it was a memory, encoded in someone else's fear. Or her own, from before. The final confession. The voice on the tape grew quieter. "There's something I have to admit. I let her in. Not with words, not with keys, but with memory. She asked me once, 'Do you want to be remembered?' And I said yes. Ayumi stared at the spinning tape reels. The voice whispered one last time. She doesn't haunt the apartment. She is the apartment. And now, so am I. Click. The tape ended. Ayumi didn't breathe. The reflection repeats. When she returned to her apartment, the hallway smelled of dust and jasmine. The door to 904 stood open, just a sliver, but she didn't go in, not yet. Instead, she walked into her own apartment and sat in front of the mirror. Her reflection was waiting. It blinked once, then smiled faintly, then mouthed the word without sound. Ayumi recognized it immediately. Repeat. Inside the sound. That night, she sat cross-legged in the center of her living room, the apartment lights off, the intercom unplugged, yet the speaker whispered anyway. She played the tape, so now you remember. Ayumi asked, "What do I do now?" The voice replied, "What we all do. Wait until it's time to record." She stared into the dark. "And when is that?" "Soon." "How will I know?" Silence. Then, "You'll hear yourself say it." Becoming the voice. She opened her eyes the next morning and felt lighter, not healed, not free, but as though something had settled into her, a memory that no longer resisted. She looked at the intercom, then at the mirror, then at the cassette. She placed a blank tape into the recorder and pressed record. She sat, and she began to speak. "I don't know how long I've been here." Her voice was calm, slow, almost practiced. And outside the building, at exactly 3:13 a.m., a woman in a black hoodie stood at the entrance, waiting, watching, knowing her time had come. It was quiet now. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but quiet in the way an abandoned house is quiet, as if sound is waiting, holding its breath, preparing its return. Ayumi lived in the stillness like someone underwater, every movement muffled, every moment a blur of déjà vu. She no longer checked the intercom, she no longer feared the voice, because now she knew when it would come, and worse, she knew what it would say. A message to herself. The tape recorder sat beside her bed. She pressed record again. The same sentence each time. "You will forget, so I'm leaving this for you." She didn't know who would find it, or when, but she knew it would happen. It always happened. She had found someone else's tape. Someone someday would find hers, and they'd hear it, and it would begin again. Mapping the clock. Every night, Ayumi stood by the door at 3:12 a.m., not 3:13, never late, always early. She no longer waited for the buzzer. She waited for herself. And like clockwork at 3:13 a.m., her own voice echoed through the intercom. "Ayumi." She didn't answer. She just listened. It was the same tone every night, not desperate, not afraid, just patient, like someone reading from a script they'd practiced hundreds of times. "Ayumi, I know you're home." The reply. One night, Ayumi pressed the button and answered back. Her voice met her voice. She whispered, "What do you want from me?" There was a pause. Then, "I want you to remember how this ends. You always forget. That's how I get in." Ayumi shook her head. "You're not me." The voice was soft now, almost kind. "I don't have to be. I just need you to doubt it long enough to open the door." And then it said, "This time, you're closer." The recording that changed. That night she replayed the original cassette, the one she had found in the storage room. But this time it ended differently. A final sentence that hadn't been there before. "If you're hearing this, it means you've already become me." Ayumi stared at the spinning tape. Was it possible for recordings to change? Or had the message always been there, waiting for her to be ready? The mirror repeats the call. Later, in the dim light of the bathroom, she stood before the mirror. No longer afraid. Her reflection smiled. She did not. The reflection raised a hand. Ayumi remained still. Then the reflection spoke first. "Do you remember it now?" Ayumi whispered, "Yes." "Good. Then it's almost time." And as the clock struck 3:13 a.m., the intercom buzzed behind her. But she was already there, already pressing the button, already whispering into it, "Ayumi," becoming the caller. She stood at the front entrance of the building the next night, for the first time, in the cold, facing the camera, just like the woman in the hoodie. She pressed the intercom for Unit 903, and she whispered in her own voice, "I'm home now." There was no answer, just a flicker from the hallway lights above, a soft breeze that smelled like memory, and the sound of footsteps, her own, from inside the unit. The final loop begins. She returned upstairs. Her apartment looked the same, familiar, lived in, slightly off. There was a package at her door, addressed to her, signed by her. Inside, a cassette, blank, unlabeled. She placed it into the recorder, pressed play. Static. Then her own voice, newer, sharper. "You are not real. You are the repetition. I am what remains." Ayumi stared at the speaker, then reached for the record button. "You will forget, so I'm leaving this for you." The apartment was quiet again. No buzz, no whispers, no footsteps. Ayumi moved through the rooms like someone walking through a life already lived. Every corner felt familiar, but no longer hers. She opened drawers and found objects she didn't remember buying. She turned on lights she didn't remember wiring. And when she looked in the mirror, the face staring back at her smiled first. The final mark. She walked to the intercom panel. The button was clean, untouched. No dust, like it had been used recently. She stared at it for a long time. Then she reached out and pressed it. It didn't buzz. It clicked. A new setting activated, one she hadn't seen before. Voice message, active. The screen flickered. A new message began to play. Her own voice, soft and steady. "I wasn't the first, and you won't be the last." We become the whisper when we forget who spoke first. Ayumi stood still, barely breathing. She waits outside because she's already inside. You remember her only when you stop being you. And then the screen went black. The visitor returns. At 3:13 a.m., there was no buzz, no knock, no voice from the wall. Only a shadow under the door, and a silhouette beyond the peephole. Ayumi didn't need to look. She knew the shape. She opened the door, slowly. Standing there was a woman in a black hoodie, face pale, eyes dark, mouth familiar. Not smiling, not threatening, just waiting. Ayumi looked into her eyes, and the woman spoke with her voice. "Please let me in. I'm real now." The stillness between. They stood like that for a long time, one on each side of the threshold. No force, no violence, just a choice. And Ayumi stepped aside. The woman entered, walked past her, calm, certain, sat at the table, crossed her legs, and waited. Ayumi closed the door behind her. 2 cups of tea. There were 2 cups of tea on the table, still warm. She didn't remember making them, but she sat and drank, across from herself. No words passed between them, no questions asked. The silence between them was not awkward, it was earned, like 2 people who had long since run out of things to say and finally understood why. The tapes on the floor. By morning, the woman was gone, but the chair across from Ayumi was still warm. On the floor were a dozen cassette tapes, all unlabeled, all hers. She picked one up and placed it in the recorder, pressed play. Her voice again, this time younger. "I knocked once, you didn't answer, but I stayed. I left the door open, and eventually you walked through it." Ayumi closed her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. The new routine. She made tea each morning now. 2 cups, one for herself, one for the echo. She cleaned the intercom, left it plugged in. She didn't wait for 3:13 anymore, because the voice could come at any time. And sometimes she answered it, and sometimes she was it. She stopped trying to remember which was which. There was comfort in the blur. The last call. One final night she stood at the door. She had a key in her hand. The hallway was silent. She walked across to Unit 904. The door opened before she touched it. Inside was her apartment. Familiar, unfamiliar, soft with echo. She stepped in, closed the door behind her, and whispered, to no one in particular, "I'm home."